Hi, this is David at Mash IT. Today we're going to do a comparison review between the Razer Blade Pro on my left and the Alienware M17 R3 on the right. Now we've previously done individual videos for each of these machines and they are on our channel, and I'll put the links in the descriptions below. But we wanted today just look at them head to head. So before I start comparing them, let's just quickly run over what we've got in each machine. Now this is my personal machine. I've had it running for about a year now. This is a 2019 Razer Blade Pro. This is a 9th generation 6-core 12-thread CPU with an NVIDIA RTX 2070. The difference between the 2019 and the 2020 are so minimal that they're still very comparable between the two. The 10th gen is pretty much the same speed as the 9th gen on the CPU, and the 2070 is still relevant. This is a 2070 Super. They're so similar that they can easily be compared. I've got this with 16 gigabytes of RAM and I've upgraded it, but it did come with a 512 SSD, and we'll talk about the storage in a little while. On the right, we have got the Alienware M17 R3, that's the 2020 model. This model is the 10th generation 6-core 12-thread CPU with the NVIDIA RTX 2070 Super graphics card. It has the 144Hz panel against the Razer Blade that had the 240Hz panel on the model I bought. This model though does have switchable graphics between Optimus or NVIDIA G-Sync. So you can press function and F7 and you can switch between either having longer battery life with Optimus or G-Sync if you want, the smoother gaming performance. So that's the specs out of the way. Let's start looking at the actual laptops themselves. In my opinion, I've loved Razer and I've loved Alienware for years, and I've flip-flopped between which I buy between the two, depending on which is better that year. And I've been using this for the last year now, and it's been a great machine for me for gaming. I always love a 17-inch screen, personally, for when I game. I know the 15-inch is more portable, but I find, in all honesty, I pop them in a bag and I'll take them to a place and I'll use it. I'm not using them on buses, trains, random places. I take them to a room and I just pop them down and I game. So for me, I always go for a 17-inch for a gaming laptop. So, the Razer Blade Pro 17-inch. The reason why I bought this one, for a 17-inch laptop, I love the actual look of this design with the actual anodized aluminium. It's slim, it's reasonably light for a 17-inch laptop. It feels sturdy. I know obviously Razer's got a reputation for breaking and this chipping, but they've held up well for me over the last year. I also liked, with this laptop at that time when I bought it, the 2070 has got quite a high wattage. I believe it's 100 or 110 watts. I'll have a look later on in the comparison graphics section. But at the time, most other laptops in the slim and light category were about 90 watts or 80 watts for the GPU, so this is quite a nice boost. In comparison with the Alienware, these do run pretty hard. You've got the 2070 Super, which has 115 watts, so that does run hard all the way through, and the same when it comes to the actual CPU. The CPU will just run flat out 4.3, its maximum turbo boost on all cores all the time. So you're getting a better gaming performance straight away out of the box on the Alienware. Whereas the Razer, in order to keep this form and function that Razer create this Razer Blade in a nice compact form, they do limit your CPU on max load. Now it's better on the 17 Pro than it is on the 15, but you're still limited to balance mode of 35 watts and the max performance mode, or the gaming mode, at 55 watts. So it's better than the 15, it's still nowhere near the performance of the Alienware. We're going to look at that in further detail in the performance section. So what about the actual usability of each of these laptops? They're both slim and light as far as 17-inch laptops go. They've both got pretty large trackpads. The Razer trackpad is by far and away better, in my opinion, than the Alienware trackpad. I found, of my time using different Windows machines, the Razer Blades have been my favourite trackpads using the Microsoft Precision drivers of all the laptops I've used over the last few years. This is a very good trackpad though, but the feel and the precision of the Razer Blade has always been better, in my opinion, than the Alienware. But when it comes to the keyboard, the Alienware keyboard wins hands down over the Razer Blade. They've both got per key lighting, they both look great, but the Razer Blade, firstly because we are in Europe, we only get the primary symbols lit on these keyboards, and I think that's a real shame. I know in America that they get the secondary symbols lit, but obviously we are second-class citizens, we only get the primary over here, as opposed to the Alienware where you have The whole backlit keyboard with the functions, the primary functions, the multimedia functions are all lit. But it's not just that bothers me about the actual Razer blade. The keyboard is not as comfortable to type on. The keys feel a little bit dead. They don't have a lot of travel. It's not a great typing experience typing on this keyboard. You get used to it. It's okay for long-term, for long-term use when I'm using it. But having spent the last couple of weeks typing on this Alienware M17R3 keyboard, this has got to be hands down the best gaming laptop keyboard I've used. It's also got an amazing layout with the cursor keys actually taken out of the main body of the actual keyboard, whereas obviously the Razer crams the cursor keys into the keyboard. And also with the 17-inch, this might be a positive for some people, you've got the number pad on the right hand side with some dedicated macro keys above. Personally, I still prefer no number pad on my keyboard because I like the fact that it's centered. That is personal preference. Everyone's going to have a different opinion on that. So obviously with this being a centered keyboard, we have up-firing speakers on the Razer Blade Pro. The Alienware has sort of downward firing speakers. So in my eyes, I was thinking I'm going to fire this, the audio test up, and the Razer Blade Pro was going to absolutely bury the Alienware in sound quality. The Razer Blade Pro does get a lot louder than the Alienware, but the actual sound clarity of the music that we played was so much better on the Alienware R3 than it was on the Razer Blade Pro. I tested a number of different tracks, and I've also tested different equalizer settings. The Alienware sounded better every time, so a win there for the Alienware. Then it comes to the screens. Both of these laptops have different screen options. I've got the 240Hz from last year. You can now get it with a 300Hz and probably even a 360Hz by now. But the Alienware's got better choices, and the choice in my opinion to pick is the 144Hz, which isn't as fast, but in all honesty, most laptops you're not going to be gaming a higher frame rate than 144Hz anyway, consistently. But then you get the option of G-Sync, and you get the option of Optimus. You can switch between the two. One other nice little feature about the Razer Blade Pro, which this Alienware hasn't got, this one comes with Windows Hello. This is a lovely feature, and since using this on my original sort of Surface Pro 3 or 4, whatever it came out, I've absolutely loved the Windows Hello facial recognition. And it's the same with this now. You lift the lid up, it looks at your face, it logs you in. It's such a convenient way to get into your laptop. Unfortunately, this version of Alienware, the M17R3, has no fingerprint reader and no Windows Hello. And I think for a premium laptop that's very expensive, I think that's a real shame. Now we're going to have a quick look at the ports that were available on both of these machines. So I'm going to close the lid. We'll have a look around the laptops. Just a quick note as well, both of these, this one has an Alienware head that lights up. The Razer has the Razer logo that lights up. The advantage of the Alienware is you can change the colour of that light. And also, I'm going to just unplug them a second. On the Alienware, you've also got the Tron ring around the back. Let me just open that up a second. And you can see that lights up as well. So that's quite a nice little feature. One of the things I love about the Alienware. And those can all be adjusted colour-wise in the Alienware Command Centre. You can set it up to suit your needs. So let's have a quick look at the ports, and then we'll look at the size. The Razer Blade. On the left-hand side, we have the Razer proprietary power adapter. We have an RJ45 Ethernet port. We have two USB 3s, and we have a Thunderbolt port. And then lastly, we have a headset jack. On the left side of the Alienware 17, we have some venting here with a Kensington lock port. We have an Ethernet jack again. This is the fold down type because obviously these are slim and light, and it curves in at the bottom. A USB 3 and a headset jack. If I turn it over to the right side, on the right side of the Razer Blade, we've got a full-size micro SD card slot, always nice to see. A Thunderbolt 3 port, a USB 3, an HDMI 2, and a Kensington lock. On the Alienware 17R3, we have a micro SD card slot, two USB 3s, and a vent. On the front of the laptops, the Razer Blade, all you have is a flashing LED. This is quite a nice little thing. It tells you whether the laptop's running or in sleep. Green means the laptop is running, white is when it's in sleep mode. Quite nice so you know what's going on with your machine. The Alienware, the front, all you've got is a couple of speaker grills either side. That's it. Now if we whiz it around to the back, we can see the Razer Blade has absolutely nothing at the back. But if we look at the actual Alienware, we've got an HDMI 2, a mini display port, a Thunderbolt 3 which also has power delivery but only to 60 watts, so you could use this for working, but you won't be plugging in a USB-C adapter to game on. It just doesn't have the power. Then we've got the Alienware graphics amplifier port if you want to add the Alienware graphics amp eGPU. And finally, we've got the power jack on the back on the Alienware. So there we go. Now let's look at the size. If I just place them up against each other, you can see that the Razer blade is ever so slightly slimmer than the Alienware 17. It really isn't a lot. You've got to run your hand over it to see it. You're probably talking about a millimetre or two. Really not much in it. But when it comes to the width and the depth, there is a bit of a difference. So here we are, we can look at the actual depth of the machines. Because you've got the rear grille and venting on the Alienware, you can see there's quite a big difference in the actual depth between these two laptops. You're probably talking a good sort of 1.5 inches between the two. So obviously having these rear firing ports that pushes the air out the back, it goes in the actual laptop's favour for its cooling performance. So you do get a harder running laptop with this Alienware, but as you can see that does increase the size. With the Alienware, it pumps all the heat up over the screen like the MacBooks have done for years, so you don't get as efficient air sort of being pushed out of the machine. So that's why they have to throttle these machines down as well as being so slim and light. Now if we look at the width, really not much in it. You're talking 1/2 inch tops. So width-wise, very similar. So you can see straight away that the Razer blade is a more compact laptop for a 17-inch. Obviously it's still nothing like a compactness of a 15-inch laptop, but it is compact, and unfortunately that is something that goes against the Razer in a lot of ways of the thermal cooling on this machine, which we'll see later on. So we've compared both laptops side by side. You can see that the Alienware 17 is slightly bigger, especially because of the vents at the back. But these are 17-inch laptops, and they're both pretty slim and light, and they're both very easy to pick up and carry around with you. Weight-wise, there really isn't much in it. When you pick them both up, the Alienware does feel a little bit lighter, but I just think that's more because of the heft of the compact nature of the Razer Blade 17. So let's get back into the laptops and take a look at the speakers next. So let's see if we can do one-hand opening. Razer Blade 17 opens up nicely. 17, as you can see, not quite one-hand opening. Slides around a little bit. Don't know how important that is to anybody, but you can see that obviously you do need two hands, one to hold it, one to open it. So firing up some royalty-free music now on both the laptops. They're both set to 50% audio. I'm going to play each of these in turn, and we're going to see which speaker sounds the best. Starting with the Razer Blade. And the Alienware. So there we have it. The Razer Blade is definitely louder, but I think the audio is a little bit clearer and is a nicer experience on the Alienware. They're both pretty good speakers, and you know, if you listen to a podcast or you know a little bit of music whilst you're working, they both do you fine. Obviously, neither of these are in the same class as a MacBook Pro 16, but there is no Windows laptop in the same class as a MacBook Pro 16. But for both of these as gaming laptops, they're both pretty impressive. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is battery life. Now, they're 17-inch laptops. They've both got reasonable sized batteries in them, but battery life is neither of their strong suits. With the Razer Blade, you obviously have different screen options, but they've all got Optimus enabled. With the Alienware M17, if you have the 144Hz screen, you can enable Optimus, or you can switch it to just G-Sync and dedicated GPU. But if you buy the 300Hz, you are stuck in discrete GPU mode. No Optimus, no G-Sync. Definitely recommend avoiding that panel if you can. Obviously 300Hz is nice, and if you're purely using for gaming and don't care about anything else, then you might want to consider it. But otherwise, get the 144Hz. It's a great panel and allows you to choose between Optimus or G-Sync. Both of these laptops are going to get you about 4 or so hours, you know, in Optimus mode. They're not great. They're not Ultrabooks. You know, they're not designed for that purpose. You can use them away from the outlet for a little while, but in all honesty, with this sort of laptop, you're probably going to be on a desk and plugged in anyway, so hopefully battery life isn't going to be a big deal. If it is, you might want to look elsewhere. Okay, so on to the performance section. The first thing we're going to look at is Cinebench, which fully tests the CPUs on both these machines. And here you can see straight away, Razer are very conservative when it comes to performance of their laptops. Obviously on the Razer Blade you don't have those rear vents, so all the actual air is going to shoot up above the screen. So this means that they have to be conservative with their power settings. Now on the maximum load with this machine it allows 55 watts, and you can see this with a quite poor score of 2,572 in Cinebench. The Alienware in comparison, Dell just let this thing run absolute max wattage and it has no problems cooling it off. You have the large vents out the back and all the heat comes straight out of the back of the machine, so it's much better for cooling. And this scored 3,106 points. So obviously CPU wise, big advantage to the Alienware over the actual Razer Blade Pro. Now we're going to look at Geekbench 5. This is the CPU part of the actual benchmark. And again, obviously the Alienware M17 R3 with its better cooling scores much better than the Razer Blade Pro 17. Now this is quite a short benchmark, so there's not as big a gap as the Cinebench. So the Razer Blade Pro 17 scored 1,152 on the single core, as opposed to 1,212 on the Alienware. And on the multi-core scores, you're talking 5,840 on the Razer Blade and 6,069 on the Alienware. So there's not as big a difference because these tests are shorter and they haven't had a chance to throttle as they have in Cinebench, but it still shows you obviously the better cooling performance on the Alienware. So while still in Geekbench, we also ran the OpenCL graphics score. Now the Razer Blade with a 2070 Max Q scored 68,954. In comparison, the Alienware M17 R3 with the 2070 Super scored 86,877, so really quite a large gain on the 2070 Super there. So that leads us neatly into the 3D Mark benchmarks. Firstly, we ran Time Spy. The Razer Blade Pro scored 7,119 with a graphics score of 7,361. The Alienware, on the other hand, scored 8,370 with a graphics score of 8,571. So some really big gains on the Alienware. Following on from Time Spy, we've got Firestrike, and the Razer Blade Pro 17 scored 16,965 with a graphics score of 19,606. The Alienware scored 18,889 with a graphics score of 22,052. So some nice gains again on the Alienware. Sorry about the results looking slightly different. They've changed the benchmark layout lately in 3D Mark. Right, so then lastly, within benchmarks, we tested Unigine Heaven. Now this was running on the Extreme HD preset. Now the Razer Blade scored 4,161 and the Alienware scored 4,605. So you can see all the way through this, the Alienware is scoring much better in both the CPU and the GPU, mostly due to the rear vent design on the Alienware, which allows it to run higher wattage on the CPU and the GPUs. This is a great gaming performance and great CPU performance from the Alienware. Right, let's move on to the conclusion. I've always loved both Alienware and Razer Blade. You can probably see from the channel we have an awful lot of both of these in. I bought this Razer Blade Pro a year ago and I've been using it happily for a year, and when at the time of which I bought it, there wasn't a great deal of strong contenders out there and I was really happy with my choice. If I was buying it again today, I have to be honest, I'm going to cut straight to the chase, I would buy the Alienware. I feel it's a much better dedicated gaming machine than the Razer Blade. The Razer Blade is more portable, not by a lot, but it is. It's got great port selection, it's got a nice power pack, you can upgrade the RAM and the 2 SSD slots. It's a lovely looking machine, great trackpad, they've both got great screens and speakers. But the Alienware, now downside is the RAM is soldered on, the Wi-Fi is soldered on, so make sure you buy what you need when you buy it. Other than that, the keyboard is amazing, the thermals are brilliant, you're getting a Max P graphics card. It's pushing that hot air straight out of the back, so it allows it to run at 150 watts on that graphics. The CPU, Dell lets it run really hard, so you're going to get full boost all the time with this laptop. The keyboard is hands down my favourite gaming laptop keyboard. Dell have really worked some magic with this keyboard, and it's a lovely keyboard to type on and to game on. The trackpad's not quite as good as Razer Blade, but in all honesty, with a machine like this, you're probably going to be using a mouse when you're gaming anyway, and then when you are using the trackpad, you'll certainly get by with it. Now, they're both premium expensive devices, And so you expect high quality with both of these machines. And I think they do both deliver in their own aspects. I do wish the Alienware had Windows Hello. I know if you get the TobiI version, people are saying that you can now use TobiI for Windows Hello, and that's a step in the right direction. I like the fact that you obviously get that with the Razer Blade Pro. So that's my thoughts. I'd be going home with the Alienware 17 if I hadn't already bought the Razer Blade Pro. Please can you comment down below, let me know what you think of both of these machines. Which one do you prefer, and can you please tell me why? If you've got any questions regarding both these machines, pop them down in the comments as well, and I'll do my best to answer you. Lastly, please hit the subscribe and the notification bell, and you'll be notified of our upcoming videos on obviously more Alienware and Razer laptops, as well as plenty of other laptops we've got coming into the studio. And lastly, thank you for watching.